My friends, you tried the no contact rule, you followed the advice, you waited, you thought, if I just disappear, they'll miss me. But they didn't, or at least not in the way you hoped. And now you're wondering what went wrong. Let's talk about it, not just what didn't work, but what needs to change in your approach. Not every person responds to silence the same way. That's the part of the no contact rule that most people overlook. You hear it all the time, just go quiet. Stop texting, walk away, they'll notice your absence, they'll come running back. It sounds simple, almost too simple. And that's because it is. Now, contact is often portrayed like some kind of magic wand. Disappear for a few weeks and boom, your phone starts buzzing, they realize what they lost, and you live happily ever after. But reality doesn't always play by that script. Sometimes you pull away and all you're met with is silence, no reaction, no regret, just indifference. And that silence cuts deeper than any message they could have sent. So what's going on? The truth is, not every person sees silence as a reason to chase. For some people, especially those who were never deeply invested to begin with, your sudden absence doesn't create longing, it creates space. Space they're perfectly fine with, space they use to move on, explore other options, or reaffirm that letting go of the connection was the right decision. Silence isn't even seen as strength. It's interpreted as emotional immaturity or manipulation, or worse, indifference. And the moment someone thinks you're trying to get a reaction out of them by going silent, the power you thought you had dissolves completely. You become predictable, you become readable, you become someone playing games, rather than someone living life. That's the hard truth. Silence without emotional growth is not power, it's posturing. People don't just miss your presence, they miss your value. And if they never deeply connected with your value when you were there, your absence won't change that. Silence only amplifies what already exists. If they already admired, respected, or loved you, your distance might spark that longing. But if they were unsure, non-committal, or emotionally distant, no contact often just gives them the perfect exit ramp. That's why no contact fails for so many, because it's applied as a technique to create desire rather than a process of real disconnection. There's a fundamental difference between silence and emotional detachment. You can stop talking to someone and still think about them constantly, still check their social media, still hope they text. That's not no contact, that's quiet obsession. That's you putting your healing in their hands, waiting for them to respond before you can move on. And the moment they don't, you spiral, because it was never about getting over them. It was about getting a reaction from them. And when that reaction doesn't come, it feels like failure. But that's not failure. That's a sign that silence on its own wasn't enough. The real shift comes when silence is backed by inner change. When you stop needing a response, when their absence becomes an opportunity to reconnect with yourself, not just bait to pull them back in. When your energy isn't consumed by thoughts of, will they reach out? But by questions like, what do I want now? Who am I becoming without this person? That's when silence becomes powerful, not because of how it affects them, but because of what it reveals about you. So if no contact didn't work, maybe it's not that they didn't miss you. Maybe it's that you were still holding on even as you pretended to let go. No contact is often misunderstood as a technique of simply cutting someone off, refusing to reach out, and waiting in silence for them to feel your absence. But the truth is, the deeper power doesn't lie in what you don't say or don't do, it lies in what you emotionally shift on the inside, because physical silence without emotional detachment is like locking the door while leaving all your windows open. You haven't really closed off the connection, you've just made it harder to access from the outside. The real transformation begins when you no longer need to use silence as a performance, when your goal is no longer to provoke guilt, curiosity, or longing, but to reclaim your inner emotional freedom. You stop operating from a place of, if I disappear, maybe they'll realize my worth, and start moving from a much more grounded question, why have I tied my self-worth to their recognition at all? That's where emotional detachment becomes everything. Emotional detachment doesn't mean becoming cold or uncaring. It doesn't mean you erase your feelings overnight or stop caring about the relationship you had. It means you release the part of you that's anxiously holding on, that's constantly hoping, that's replaying conversations and stalking their online activity, looking for signs of hope. Detachment is the quiet decision to stop negotiating your peace with someone who isn't showing up for it. It's not silence for their benefit, it's distance for your clarity. When you're emotionally detached, your silence carries a different weight. You're no longer waiting for their response to feel validated. You're no longer stuck in that limbo of, should I reach out? Or what if they forget about me? Because your value isn't hanging in the balance of their attention anymore. It's anchored in your own sense of self-worth. And from that place, you can truly move forward. Whether they notice or not, people feel the difference between someone who's silent and suffering and someone who's silent and solid. One feels like a tactic, the other feels like peace. And here's what makes that powerful. The moment you shift your focus inward toward your healing, your growth, your future, they begin to sense that emotional pullback. It's not just that you're not texting, it's that your energy isn't lingering. Your mental and emotional availability is gone. That vacuum is what creates real presence. That's when they start to wonder, not because you've played a game, but because they're no longer in the center of your world. But this kind of shift can't be faked. You can't pretend not to care. You can't try to act emotionally detached while secretly checking your phone every 5 minutes. That only exhausts you and deepens the emotional attachment. True detachment comes from understanding that this person doesn't hold the keys to your fulfillment, that your life, your purpose, your joy, none of it depends on what they decide to do next. So many people try no contact thinking it's about removing communication, but what they really need to remove is the dependency, the internal narrative that says, I'm only okay if they come back. That's what traps you. Letting go isn't about pretending the bond never existed. It's about accepting that regardless of how deep the connection felt, you are still whole without their presence. Silence is just the outer form. Emotional detachment is the inner freedom. And when you finally stop needing their recognition to feel valuable, that's when you become truly untouchable. Not bitter, not closed off, just free. When you're in the aftermath of a breakup or emotional disconnection, it's easy to fall into a subtle trap, waiting to be chosen again. You may have gone no contact, stopped reaching out, pulled your energy back, but emotionally, you're still stuck in that invisible holding pattern. Deep down, you're waiting for a text, a call, an apology, something that says, you mattered, I was wrong, I want you back. This is the dynamic that needs to shift. Because as long as you are still seeking validation from someone who walked away, ignored your worth, or took your presence for granted, you're giving them emotional power they haven't earned. You're outsourcing your sense of value to someone else's moment of realization. And worse, you're allowing them to remain in the position of the chooser while you quietly hope to be chosen. That's the old dynamic, and it's not serving you anymore. The shift begins when you stop living in that emotional waiting room and start stepping into your own value, not as a performance, but as an identity. You move from the question, do they still want me, to the much more powerful question, do I still want this version of them in my life? This flips the script entirely. Now you're not sitting around hoping for their recognition. You're evaluating if they even deserve access to you at all. This isn't about revenge or playing games. It's about realigning the emotional power dynamic. And the most effective way to do that isn't by shouting your worth, over-explaining, or trying to prove how great you are. It's by showing, not through words, but through your energy and behavior, that you no longer seek validation from them, that you've reclaimed your emotional autonomy. And what happens when you do this? Something very interesting. They start to question their place in your life, because here's the truth about human psychology. People notice when their emotional access is no longer guaranteed. When the person who once made them feel important, desired, or validated suddenly stops orbiting them, a void is created. That uncertainty forces reflection. They start to wonder, did I lose something valuable? Why don't I feel them in my life anymore? Why are they not reacting like before? This is not about manipulation. It's about shifting the center of gravity. Instead of orbiting them, you become the force they begin to feel pulled toward. You don't need to be cold or dramatic to create this shift. In fact, sometimes it's as subtle as not replying right away, not initiating, being warm but distant, friendly but unavailable. You stop explaining yourself. You stop needing closure. You stop doing the emotional labor. You don't chase. You don't correct the narrative. You don't check if they've noticed. You simply live, present, powerful, and moving forward. And that quiet strength creates contrast. They remember the version of you who was emotionally accessible, who answered quickly, who always sought resolution. Now they're met with something different, still kind, still composed, but no longer dependent on them. That's when the shift happens. That's when they start seeking your validation, not the other way around. But the key is that you're not doing it for them, you're doing it for you, because the real power isn't in making someone come back. The real power is in knowing that even if they don't, you didn't lose yourself in the process. You stopped trying to be chosen. You chose yourself. And in doing so, you became the one who decides. People are drawn to what they can't fully predict. That's a simple truth about human behavior. Certainty is comfortable, but it rarely creates desire. When someone knows exactly how you'll react, how much you care, how quickly you'll respond, and that you're always emotionally available, you may become dependable, but not magnetic. What really grips attention, especially in the aftermath of emotional disconnection, is uncertainty. It's the subtle art of not being fully figured out anymore. That's where controlled ambiguity comes in. Controlled ambiguity is not about being manipulative or emotionally unavailable. It's about disrupting the patterns someone has come to expect from you. When you were in a connection or relationship, there were emotional habits, ways you responded, reached out, or showed up. Maybe you were the one who always initiated conversation, who always explained how you felt, who consistently tried to make peace. That consistency gave them a clear emotional map of who you were and how much you cared. But when that map stops working, when you suddenly become harder to read, it creates tension. And in that tension, curiosity is born. This shift doesn't require dramatic changes. In fact, the most powerful ambiguity is subtle. You might respond to a message later than usual. You might be polite but less emotionally open. You might show kindness but no longer offer deep emotional insight into your thoughts or intentions. You're present but distant, engaged but not invested. It's this dance between warmth and detachment that creates intrigue. The person on the other end starts asking questions internally. Are they still interested? Have they moved on? Why do I feel unsure now? That inner questioning is where your power grows. Because when someone is sure of your emotional position, they have no reason to pursue clarity. But when that position becomes unclear, not cold, just undefined, they begin to chase understanding. They may reach out more. They may test the waters. They may try to regain emotional control. But by keeping your emotional output balanced and intentional, you remain in the position of self-possession. You're no longer reacting. You're choosing what and how you share. This isn't a game. It's about self-respect, control. Controlled ambiguity helps break old emotional cycles. If they're used to getting reassurance from you, now they're met with your inner silence. If they're used to feeling secure in your emotions, now they feel a slight edge of uncertainty. That creates a disruption in their internal narrative about you. And when someone no longer knows exactly where they stand with you, their brain starts working harder to analyze the situation. They become more aware of your presence, more attentive to your behavior, and more impacted by your responses. But the key is subtlety. If it becomes obvious that you're trying to create distance or mystery, the illusion breaks. They'll see it as manipulation or emotional immaturity. The shift must come from genuine detachment and emotional independence, not a tactic to provoke a reaction, but a natural consequence of you no longer investing in emotional predictability for their comfort. Controlled ambiguity is about becoming a mystery, not because you're hiding something, but because you're no longer broadcasting everything. You don't need to explain yourself. You don't need to justify your silence. You don't need to answer every question with complete transparency. You are still you, kind, composed, grounded, but there's now a layer of you they can't quite access anymore. And that layer becomes the source of their intrigue. When someone feels they're losing emotional access to you, not through anger, but through calm unpredictability, they begin to feel the shift in dynamic. They sense that they are no longer in control of the emotional rhythm. And that disruption, when handled with composure, can be more powerful than any conversation or confrontation. Uncertainty, when aligned with self-worth, becomes attraction. One of the most overlooked yet powerful shifts you can make during emotional detachment or after a breakup is learning to stop needing to be understood. It sounds simple, but it runs deep. The desire to be understood, especially by someone who hurt you or didn't value you, can quietly keep you trapped in emotional bondage. It's that lingering hope that if you just say the right thing, explain your side clearly enough, or express your pain in just the right way, they'll finally get it. They'll finally see what they lost, recognize how deeply you felt, and maybe even apologize. But here's the truth. The need to be understood is often just a disguised need for validation. It's the emotional version of still knocking on a door that's already been shut. And when you're trying to heal or regain your sense of self, continuing to seek emotional understanding from the person who either misunderstood or disregarded you in the first place only prolongs the pain. This craving comes from a very human place. We want our story to be known. We want our feelings to be acknowledged. We want to feel like the way we loved, the depth of what we gave, it all mattered. And if someone walks away without ever acknowledging that, it can feel like a piece of our worth is left dangling in their hands. So we write long texts, we over-explain, we defend our choices. We hope that clarity will lead to closure. But it rarely does, because someone who truly wanted to understand you would have done so already. Someone who respected your emotional experience would have met you with curiosity, not confusion. And someone who really valued your presence wouldn't need a post-exit explanation to realize your worth. If they couldn't or wouldn't hold space for your truth when it counted, what makes you believe they're suddenly going to do it now? That's where the shift needs to happen. Not in them, but in you. You stop talking to be heard. You stop expressing to be validated. You stop explaining as if understanding you is the path to your peace. Because it's not. Understanding yourself is, you begin to realize that not every emotion you feel needs to be seen or affirmed by someone else to be real. Your experience is valid, even if they never acknowledge it. Your love was real, even if they minimized it. Your effort mattered, even if they overlooked it. And the moment you stop chasing the emotional receipt from them, that's when you truly start to move forward. This doesn't mean you bury your voice. It means you start using it differently. You no longer speak from a place of trying to convince someone of your value. You speak to reclaim your energy, your clarity, your peace, not to argue for your worth. And here's the most liberating part. The less you need to be understood, the more powerful you become. Because now you're no longer emotionally bound to their perception of you. You're not performing for their recognition. You're not trying to tie your healing to their capacity to empathize. You're simply walking away, not because they pushed you, but because you chose yourself. You're quiet, not because you've got nothing left to say, but because you finally realize that saying more won't change anything. You let go of the need for them to get it. And in doing so, you get something far more valuable: your freedom. Sometimes the most mature thing you can do is to be misunderstood by someone and let it be. Let them believe what they want to believe. Let them spin their version of events. Let them stay confused if they must. Because the truth is, your peace isn't found in them finally understanding your heart. It's found in you no longer needing them to show. The final and most transformative shift comes when you stop making your healing about them, not about their response, not about whether they regret losing you, not about if they come back, if they miss you, if they finally realize what they had. True healing is never dependent on someone else's behavior. It's about you stepping into a version of yourself that no longer revolves around their absence. Because here's what often happens. Even after we've gone no contact, even after we've stepped away, we're still mentally tethered, still wondering what they're thinking, whether they're checking our stories, whether they're hurting too. That obsession with their internal state keeps us locked in place. And we mistake that hyper focus for processing, when really it's just prolonging the attachment. But healing isn't about what they're doing, it's about what you're becoming. There comes a moment, quiet but powerful, when you stop asking, will they come back? And start asking, what do I want for my life now? That's when the real shift takes place. Your energy, once entirely directed outward, begins to turn inward. You begin to invest in your own growth. Not as a performance to make them regret, but as a commitment to yourself. You start recognizing that your next chapter doesn't require their recognition. Your value doesn't increase if they come back. It doesn't decrease if they don't. You no longer tie your self-worth to how someone else responds to your absence. You start building a life that reflects who you truly are, not who you had to be in order to hold on to this shift. When it's authentic is what often creates the biggest emotional impact. Because people can feel when they've lost emotional access to you. Not because you're pretending, not because you're trying to prove something, but because you're no longer energetically anchored to them. You shifted the gravity of your life back to your own orbit. But you're not doing it for them to notice. You're doing it because you finally understand your healing was never meant to impress them. It was meant to liberate you. This is when you stop posting for a reaction. You stop waiting for the text. You stop checking if they've seen your message or noticed your absence. Instead, you begin living fully, authentically, peacefully. You cultivate joy that isn't performative. You create progress that isn't rooted in spite. You move forward without needing to look back. This kind of shift is quiet. There's no applause, no dramatic closure, sometimes no closure at all. Just a subtle day when you wake up and they're not the first thing on your mind anymore. A moment when you feel good, not because of anything external, but because you're at peace internally. That's the power of making your healing about you, not as a reaction, not as a revenge arc, but as a return to self. And when that happens, the question is no longer, will they come back? The real question becomes, would they even fit in the life I'm building now? That's not bitterness, that's clarity, that's growth, that's self-worth. And it's where your power truly lives, not in their regret, but in your rebirth.